All right, welcome back to Comp 211, everybody. Today we are going to be focused on introducing the grammar of Vim. As was mentioned in the Sakai announcement, there's an open Q&A on Poll Everywhere. We're not going to be using Zoom today because most of what we're going to be focusing on is following along in your Vim on your local container. So having your window positioned such that you can kind of easily either switch back and forth between them, or maybe have half of your screen dedicated to the stream and half of your screen dedicated to your container. Either way should be fine. If you do go half and half, I would probably encourage horizontal mode. So a couple of quick announcements. As you all know, things are happening, but everything is totally fine. So what we're going to be focused on today is getting more comfortable in Vim. And the good news is we're already remote for the things that we're doing. Over the next night and tomorrow, I'm going to encourage you to practice what we learned today, and also be sure that you've read through the next chapter, chapter 2, files and directories and paths. And that will help prepare you for the quiz. And once we have an understanding of files and paths and directories and how to navigate them in a textual command line environment, we'll be all set. Starting Wednesday, we'll look at Git and GCC, and GCC is our C compiler. So we're going to start looking at C starting on Wednesday, and I hope you'll have the book ready to go and start working your way through it. We'll have an assigned reading on that going out Wednesday. And we'll spend the back half of the week getting comfortable with some C concepts as well as Git. The C that you'll read in the book is all valid, but we'll also complement what you see in the book with some of the more recent developments in C, and use some best practices today that didn't quite exist then, but everything that you read about the syntax, the rules, and otherwise still applies. I'm gonna go ahead and take a few questions here. The next quiz will be primarily on chapter 2. Yes, and it'll be in a very similar format to what we looked at before. With Vim, we're not going to have the same, I would typically in a normal semester quiz you on some of the things that we're going to learn today. However, I don't think it's worthwhile when you can have notes and things like that. So I'm going to trust that you all are trying to commit what we learned today to memory, and I'll point out a few things that I think are very important to try and just get into a habit of having muscle memory for, and being reflexively able to carry out on your keyboard. But I'll talk about that when we get there. Someone asks, when you type something out, you didn't see anything in your command line. That's probably because mine's a little bit different than yours. I've got some files in there. I wouldn't worry on that. We'll come back to this later. And so with respect to the memory that a virtual machine takes, so let me just talk about what a virtual machine is, why there is memory required to run a virtual machine on your computer, and try and alleviate some concern and stress. So a virtual machine is another operating system that is running in the context of your primary host operating system. And you are running, both Windows and Mac users are running an instance of the Linux operating system, of a relatively lightweight install of the Linux operating system virtually on your machine. By default, it's not going to be doing much to take your processor's time. It will take some memory, but if you're not actively using it, your operating system will use some techniques you'll learn about in the operating systems course, Comp 530, to background that memory such that it's not really getting in the way of anything else. Most modern operating systems are trying to use as much of your available RAM and memory as possible. And they'll take various techniques to compress certain things in memory, or shift certain things in memory off to your disk if they're not getting used at all, in such a way that it's really trying to use as close to 100% of your memory as possible, because that's going to give you the fastest performance on your machine. Free memory is effectively wasted memory. But if you're very concerned about this, I did post in a Sakai post how to shut down WSL, and you just have to shut it down and start it back up. Honestly, I would try not to be too concerned over this. If you've got 8 gigabytes of RAM and you just let it chill in the background, I don't think it's going to impact your computer's performance. But if you're very stressed about that, just shut it down and start it back up. Great. All right, so I'm going to talk, there's one more question on how to tell whether or not you're logged into your host machine or your or another machine or your container. So let's talk about that first. And there's one other question that came in that was quiz results. I'll post those after class today. So on Windows, when you've got PowerShell open, you'll likely see a prompt that looks something like this. But I've already, when I started my, when you start a terminal in Windows or Mac, you begin in your user's home directory. So the files that are in your user's home directory, like outside of your terminal, are going to be here. And so we cloned a repository named Learn CLI to 11. And when you change your directory into that directory, we're now working in our in the directory for this project, this repository. And so if I run the script to begin my container, what this is doing is this is beginning a process in that virtual machine that is protected from everything else so that we're not worried about messing something up on our host machine. On Mac, this is going to look different because you're using a different shell than PowerShell. PowerShell is Windows only. On Mac, you're probably using Bash or Z shell. But once you're logged into your running container, the way that you'll know that is you'll see learn CLI $ as your prompt string. So this is where you can enter your commands, and that's how you can identify that you were successfully logged into your container. Right? I think the book mentions it, but if not, if you want to clear your screen such that you have a blank page and go back to the top, the clear command does that. And you'll see me do that pretty frequently to try and keep what it is we're currently talking about on the screen and things we previously talked about off of it. Today we're going to be working with a markdown file. And there's a command here that I will highlight that I would encourage you to go ahead and run within the context of your container. It's this one here. Markdown is a markup language that allows you to write plain text and use certain symbols and conventions for annotating your text such that it conveys some formatting, but without needing to use a full-on editor like Google Docs or Microsoft Word. So what's really nice about Markdown is we're working in plain text only, which is the preferred medium for programmers. And because of this, you'll see that Markdown gets used in all sorts of different places in the software engineering community and in academia. It's very easy to convert a Markdown file to other formats, such as HTML if you wanted to put it on the web, or PDFs. In fact, our syllabus and any PDF document you get from me, it started out as a Markdown file, and then I used a program called Pandoc, which I'll show you later on in the semester, for converting this file that we're working with to a PDF that looks fancy and academic and like you know a lot about how to produce nice looking documents. So this command that we're running here is going to allow us to download a file from the web that's a Markdown file and put it in a specific place. So to produce this command, I'm going to say curl and then an option of a -L. And what we're doing is just trying to get the output. Let me show you what's happening here in one pass. So https://bit.ly/markdown file. So you'll notice there's some text that appeared on my screen because I didn't complete the command. The little bit of code that came after this, the greater than symbol and then the example.md, what that's doing is redirecting the output of this curl command to a file named example.md. Right? So curl is downloading, is used for downloading or accessing files off of the internet. And this URL is what we're downloading. And we're wanting this to follow location links effectively. So this isn't actually the URL that this file is at. It's shorter because the long one is much longer and I didn't want to make you type that out. And so this URL is going to be a link to somewhere else. And by default, curl won't follow those links. So the -L option is saying, hey, follow those links. And then this greater than symbol followed by example.md is saying, take the printed output of this command and redirect it to a file named example.md. Right, so now if I were to list the files in my directory after running this command, and there's some progress printed to the screen, mine's wrapping around so it looks kind of like gibberish. But if I use ls, you'll see that I've got probably more files than you, but the important one is this example.md. So from there, we can say vim example.md to bring our file up, right? So I'm going to go back to the slide for just a moment and talk about where we're going while this is here. One of the nice things about YouTube and being able to follow along live is you can rewind or pause the video just like a DVR if for some reason you're stuck on a given step, and then resume, and it should work out just fine. So as I mentioned, Markdown is a text format that is easy for producing documents in other formats from them. And then there's a file or a program called Pandoc that makes it really easy to convert these files between one another. And today we're going to use this format to practice working in Vim, and that'll have sort of a twofold benefit. You'll get a little bit of experience looking at Markdown formatted text, and you'll get to see how you can make headers and bold things and underline things, as well as the emphasis of today's lecture, which is learning how to navigate Vim. In normal mode, Vim is driven by a grammar, and this is what makes Vim so exciting. It has a language that once you're comfortable operating in the context of that language, you can do things editing text that you couldn't imagine otherwise. So we're going to start with a very simple grammar and extend it and build our way up from here. Right? So if we take a look at our grammar and just review what we know about these grammars, we see that our starting symbol is a command. So when we're in normal mode, we're giving commands. And we're going to see that right now, the only command we can give is a cursor to command. So that's going to move our cursor from where it is to some other position. These are the types of commands we're forming. And this grammar is written kind of deliberately. Notice the cursor to rule is just an alias of location. So there's no difference between cursor and to and location. So what gives? Well, many grammars are designed intentionally to try and provide some semantics, some meaning to how, like when you parse one of these strings, which looks kind of cryptic as some input, if you parse it using a grammar that's well designed, you can kind of derive what the meaning of that input string is based on how it parses. And so here we're going to extend this grammar so it'll be more sophisticated than this. But for right now, we can see that the cursor to is going to go to a location, and what we need to give it is a location. And we can see that a location is any of currently line below or line after or character before or character after. And the terminals for those are J, K, H, and L. So the keys that are right along your home row, which you've already gotten some practice moving around. So let's go take a look at those just briefly and convince ourselves that when we press a button like J, that's a complete command. That command has been parsed and now executed, right? J again, and we're moving down. K is moving us up. L is moving us to the right, and H is moving us to the left, right? If this was all Vim could do, this would be a waste of everybody's time, right? And this is what you're used to being able to do on a normal keyboard and in a normal editor with your arrow keys. But what we're going to see is Vim can do much, much more than this and has much more interesting locations we can navigate to. So we're going to grow this grammar. And one of the first ways we're going to grow this grammar is with some additional location terminals, right? In fact, there's a bunch of these, and these aren't all of the terminals there are. There's way more than this as well. But these are some of your most usual suspects and some of the ones that I'm going to encourage you to learn first. Before I get into these, because I'm going to give you a conceptual framework for navigating these, this looks pretty overwhelming when you just see a list of them directly. I'm going to cheat a little bit on my grammar. And notice that I don't have a lot of rules for saying cursor to is a line below or a line above or a character to the left or a character to the right, and have like a long ORed list of possible locations here. Because notice there's a ton of these, right? There's at least 15 listed here on the slide. We're going to take a shortcut and say this capital location refers to any entry in this table of terminals. And the terminals are effectively going to be on the right-hand side. And I'll explain some of these more advanced ones in just a moment. All right? So because these are so difficult to sort of process as a list without understanding what's going on or having a good mental framework for it, and if you just try and memorize them all, it's hard to know which to use. I think the best way to learn this is to take some inspiration from the world of memes and apply galaxy brain meme to the idea of being able to move around in Vim. So you've learned 4 locations already that are all terminals, effectively up, down, left, right, with JKHL, right? These are the smallest steps you can make when navigating in Vim. And so you really only make them when you want to move somewhere very close by. Just shift your character one over the other. This is not how you want to spend your time. Like, you don't crawl around the world. Normally, you don't want to crawl around Vim in this way either for any longer than you need to. So the next set of keys is how we can sort of walk around Vim. We can move a little bit at a brisker pace. And the W key will take us to the next word. The B key is sort of like the inverse. It will take you back. E will take you to the end of the next word. And I'll talk about the toggle surrounding in just a moment. All right, so if you try going back to Vim and press W, notice that's bringing you to the start of the next word each time you press the W lowercase. And you press B, and that's moving you back, right? So W is jumping forward a word, W, word at a time, W, B, back, back by one word at a time. You can also jump E to the ends of each word. And that's a common way of moving around as well, because often you want to go like I'm in the middle of a word, like separated. E brings me right to the end of the word, and then I could start editing from there. All right. I'll come back to the surrounding parentheses in just a moment. So driving is getting you a little bit further, a little bit faster. And the idea here is oftentimes when you're on the line that you're working in, like, so you've navigated, your cursor is on the right line, and now you're trying to move somewhere far from where your cursor is within that line. The first set that I want to talk about is move to the beginning of a line or the end of a line. And as you all read about in the previous chapter, just like with regular expressions, the caret symbol means beginning of line. And so this is a common convention, not only in grep in regular expressions, but also in Vim and many other editors. Right? And dollar symbol, it means end of line. So notice if you press the caret symbol, that brings you to the start of a line. Dollar symbol brings you to the end of a line. Right? Caret, dollar. Now the others, I'm going to go back to the beginning of my line, are going to jump you to a specific character. So let's say we wanted to jump to the letter Y, that is all the way over here, right? So if you press FY, you're finding, and then whatever, like F is the find, and then the next character right after that is the character you're searching for in that given line. So notice that brought us right to the next Y, all right? I'm gonna go back to the start of my line, and let's try something there where there's multiple of these, like P's. So FP is jumping me to find the next P in this line, and if you press the semicolon, that would keep searching forward, right? Let's try something where there's a bunch of these. So if I go back to the start of a line with upper caret and do FA, and then you press semicolon, notice that you're jumping to specific characters within that line. And so often you'll be on a line and you'll see that there's some place that you want to jump to, some specific character you're looking to reach. So F and then that character, and then if there turned out to be one before where you were trying to go, pressing that semicolon will keep you moving very quickly. Right? Similarly, capital F and then a character moves you backwards. Right? So capital F is the inverse of lowercase f. Lowercase f finds forward, capitalized F is going to find backwards. And this is a common convention where the capital form of something means sort of the opposite or something very closely related. And here, when we're thinking about moving around, most of the keys that will jump us forward, if you use the capitalized version, they'll often jump you backwards. And that's the case here. Sometimes you want to move just before or up to the letter that you're looking for, like let's say TS, and I can press semicolon again, and that's going to jump me just before the letter I'm searching to. I think in the early days, choosing to focus on the F key here and get used to find and semicolon to jump forward to a character in a line winds up being the most valuable one of these two pairs to learn. But once you get comfortable, adding the jumping right before to a character with the same sort of syntax is nice. There's one more item on this entry that I want to show you that's handy when programming. Let's go down. So if we press J all the way down to line 9, and soon I'll show you how to use Galaxy Mind to get exactly where we want to go in one step. And then I might press Word a couple of times, so W, to move my cursor forward to the O. All right, so I'm on the word 1. And often when you're programming, you'll have variable names that get used throughout your program, and you want to jump from one place where you're using the variable to the very next place. Or you've got your cursor over a function name, you want to jump to the next place that function is called. The asterisk, each time you press the asterisk button, it's looking at what is the word under your cursor, and it's going to jump you forward to the next instance of that word. So if you're on a variable name, boom, next into that variable name, right? And so that's a quick way of jumping forward to a word. Now, as with the Galaxy Brain meme, all of these things are inferior to what I'm about to show you, right? So the big reveal is what we're about to see, and then the first things that I'm going to encourage you to focus on memorizing are the following, right? And this is teleportation. So with teleportation, you can search your entire document using regular expressions, but we'll focus on just matching exact patterns with plain text here in just a moment, forwards and backwards. And once again, notice that the / followed by whatever you're searching for, and then pressing enter will search forward for you. And then the question mark, which is holding down shift and pressing the / key, so they're the same thing, it's just using the shift key again to modify it, will search backwards for that word. And then the N key, whether you're using lowercase or uppercase, will search in that same direction, forward or backwards, for the next match. So let's take a look at this. And here is where, this is what I'm going to encourage you to lean on and try and get used to working in immediately in focusing on moving forward. So let's say I wanted to get to the word asterisk, right? So I'm looking at the word asterisk, and I type a / and then AST, and press enter, and boom, I'm there, right? If I were to press N, it would bring me to the next instance of this, which is the word pasting, right? If I were to press Shift N and move backwards, it brings me back to asterisk, right? So let me type that one more time. So / AST, the / is beginning a search, and it turns out this is a regular expression, so you can use like the dot to match any character and other things like that. But I'm just searching for AST, press enter, and then boom, I'm there. Let's say I wanted to jump to paragraphs / para, boom, my cursor is there and I'm ready to do work, right? And if I press N, it would bring me down to separated, paragraph again, multiple paragraphs. And so you can see that when you search and you press N, as you move to the next match, once you reach the bottom, it cycles you back up to the top. And remember, Shift N moves you in the backwards direction. But if your cursor was somewhere, like let's say my cursor is here down on line 13, and I wanted to get back to this word second, I could use the question mark, which is, remember, Shift / is how you get a question mark, and second, press enter, and boom, I've jumped and teleported my cursor right there. So the best way to get to where you want to go when you're working in Vim is look at the word that you're trying to reach, look at the place you want to go, type a /, and then type the first few characters to get there. Like let's say I wanted to get to actual down here in the bottom, ACT, enter, and boom, you're there. You don't have to move your hand to the mouse. You don't have to use H, J, K, and L to very slowly scroll somewhere. You can jump exactly where you want to go. This ability to search and jump straight to the word you're looking for, and then to quickly press N to move to the next matches, or Shift N to move to the previous matches, this is the bread and butter of navigating in Vim. And you'll want to take like a binary search like approach, right? If I asked you pick a number between, I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 100, and I'll tell you like if it's greater or less. Like you jump as close to the match as you think you can get, which would be 50. You don't start 1, 2, 3, 4 and linear search it. And so with the ability to search, you can actually in close to constant time jump exactly where you want to go. There's one more variation on teleporting, which is jumping to a specific line number. Right? So to do that, you'll enter the line number and then a capital G for go, right? And so let's say I wanted to go to line 50. So 50, I just typed at 50 capital G, boom, I'm on line 50, right? 0G, oops. sorry, GG, lowercase, is the weird one that brings you to the top, and there's no line 0. I'm confusing my line numbers with my array indexing. So I'm going to go to the bottom of my file with a capital G, and if I press 1G for line 1, that's what gets me there. So I tried 0G, and that doesn't have any meaning because there is no line 0, and that's why I was momentarily confused. It always throws me off when we start counting from 1, right? But if I want to go to line 10, 10, capital G, boom. And so when you have an error in your file that you try and compile, and it says, hey, on line 364, you've got a syntax error, pressing 364G brings you right to that point in your file, and you're ready to start debugging some issue. The last line of the file you can get to with just a capital G, or it turns out 0G will bring you there just the same as well, because 0 doesn't have a meaningful line number. All right. I'm going to take a couple of questions here real quick. So if you get stuck in insert mode, the best thing you can do is Control open square bracket, and you'll go back to normal mode. So Control open square bracket is your comfort zone. Like if you find yourself in a scary place in Vim, Control open square bracket, and then capital ZZ to quit and exit out. So if I wanted to do that, I could get back to my terminal here, and then I can get right back in and be back at a normal state if I needed to, if I found myself in some really weird place, and sometimes you do. There will be a cheat sheet with all these commands that's I'll post to the resources page if I haven't yet, and I would encourage printing that out if possible. So depending on, there are some certain ways that, like E and W, a question of why does E not take me to the last character of some sequence of digits? It's trying to be content aware to a certain degree. So notice if I press B, that's bringing me back to the start of this word, but not necessarily the hash tick. And E is taking me to the end of this word, but not the hash tick or the period. There are ways of, if you use the capitalized variations of this, they'll bring you back to complete blocks versus the smaller ones, but that's a little bit beyond our concern. Typically, I wouldn't, like when you're moving to a specific character, the best thing you can do is the F and then E for jump to a specific letter if you wanted to go to a specific letter in a given line. Or if you wanted to jump further, like let's say I wanted to get to considering, slash and then cons, enter brings me down to considering, and you jump directly there, right? The moving around between words, often once you get close to the word that you're looking for, that letter that you want to be on, that's when you'll finally go to crawl mode and go a letter at a time, right? Cool. I think that's most of them. I'll talk about converting between file formats in a lecture where we can actually do that, but the MD extension is going to give special syntax highlighting in Vim and in other editors that are aware of Markdown. All right, I'll come back to some more questions in just a bit. So we need to talk about, okay, we've seen some locations, and this is how we can move our cursor from where it currently is to somewhere else. And now we need to talk about, well, how can we operate on our text? We're going to add an additional command, this operation. And so what we're saying here is we're extending our syntax. We're growing our language, right? And at the very top, we're saying a command can either be a cursor to, or what we're looking at new is an operation. So let's go look at the production rule for operation. One operation is going to be a verb followed by a cursor to. Cursor to is what we just looked at. That's what says, hey, go from where my cursor currently is to some other location. So this idea that we're going to put a verb in front of it means that we're going to carry out an action from where our current cursor currently is to some other place. Like if we wanted to delete from where our cursor is to the end of a line, we'll see a way of doing that by using the delete variation of a verb, and that's going to be the D terminal, right? So we can say D followed by cursor to end of line, which is the $ symbol, right? And so with a command such as $, if we were to parse this and think about, well, how would this actually be represented in a parse tree using this grammar? The verb is delete, the cursor to is $, which we know is the end of line, and that's what's going to cause our text to be deleted to the end of a line. The one that I want you to focus on getting comfortable with right now is actually change, though. I'll come back and talk about delete and yank later. Yank just means copy. Change is the important one to get comfortable with, and I wish someone had told me this when I was learning Vim, because I leaned on delete way more than I should have, when change is actually the much more valuable verb to know and get comfortable with. Right? So let's practice change really quickly. So let's say I wanted to change line 4. So I'm going to go to say, I'm going to search backwards. So question mark and blank brings me back up. So question mark, blank, enter brings me back to the word blank. And let's say I wanted to change all the way to the end of a line. So C is the terminal for change. So I can press C. And when I press C, notice nothing has happened because I still haven't formed a complete command. Vim is waiting on us to form an actual complete command. We've started a new command with this change command, and now I need to say what is the location we're actually changing to. So I pressed C, and now I'm going to press the $, all right? And notice what happened, and I'm going to undo this really quickly by going back to normal mode with Control, open square bracket, and U. So I pressed C and then $, and as soon as I did that, from where my cursor is to where the location was, which was end of line, we've deleted that. We've actually cut it into our clipboard, so we still have that if we needed to get access to it. And notice I'm in insert mode now, so I can type. So paragraphs are separated by one or more lines, period. And then if I want to go back from insert mode to normal mode, that's where the Control open square bracket comes into play. So Control open square bracket brings me back to normal mode, and I've changed the end of that line, all right? If I wanted to go to the start of the line and say change, I could press the caret symbol. That brings me, the caret will bring me back to the start of a line. And I wanted to change this word. I can press C and then W to change that word, right? So W was the key that the location terminal that we used to jump word by word. And now I can type in the paragraphs are separated by one or more lines. And I notice that I've got a grammatical error here. So I might use the FA and then, FA and then semicolon to jump me forward to the one that I was looking for. And I will DW that to delete that word and get rid of it, right? There's a lot of information that's coming at you quickly in this, and you're not expected to be syncing it all in immediately. The hope is in giving you a mental framework for the types of things you can do. You'll be able to reference the cheat sheet and gain some practice thinking in these ways. The idea is we're going to be primarily trying to jump directly to where we want to edit, and then using these verbs to either change something or delete something or copy something. All right, let's try one more example of this. Let's say I wanted to change from where my cursor is to the start of the line, right? I wanted to get rid of all the words here. The paragraphs are separated by. So if I did C for change and then caret for beginning of line, I've changed from where my cursor was all the way to the beginning of line, and I'm in insert mode and I can start typing. Paragraphs need one or more lines. Control open square bracket, bring me back to normal mode. This is the text here is kind of nonsense. The point is we're able to form commands that are allowing us to change text from where we are to somewhere else. If I wanted to, I could even use my teleportation, right? So I could say C, change, and then / cons for considering all the way down here on line 19. And when I press enter, all of the text that was between here is about to be changed, right? So all of the and I just did Control open square bracket and U to undo the last thing that I did. And that's something that you'll commonly find yourself doing. Just U to undo, and you'll be back to where you started. right? So this idea that we can combine some verb action with any of these locations allows us to express quite a few different types of commands than you otherwise would be able to. Right? Let's take a look at yank really quickly. Actually, I'll show you yank in just a second, where we yank a complete line at a time, which is copy a line at a time. All right. For some of the specific questions of if you're seeing like an error message, I would encourage probably backing out. If you're seeing some kind of error, control open square bracket and then capital ZZ to try and get you back to your terminal, and then be sure you are in your Learn CLI container and start it back up. If for some reason that's not working for you, come work with us in office hours, and we can get you set up, and then you can follow along with this video at another time. If you're not seeing line numbers, that means you're probably working in Vim from somewhere outside of our container. If you're in the container, you should see the line numbers just fine. All right, good question here. I'm going to clear these questions real quick, just so that I have an easier time following along. The question was, what if you start a command? Like I press D here. I've started a delete command. Uh-oh, what do I do? Well, you've got two options. You can just go with it and like delete to the end of the line and then press undo really quickly. But it turns out if you press D and then control open square bracket, you're exiting out of that command such that it nullifies it, it cancels it out. So again, open square bracket, if you press something you didn't mean to, lean on that. If you press something you didn't mean to and something went away from your screen, just press U to undo it, right? So if we wanted to use the same technique for generating a command string from this grammar, we can start with our start symbol, which is a command, and we're going to form an operation. We're choosing this variant of the OR. And we know that an operation, its production rule says it's a verb and a cursor to. The verb comes first, and then it's followed by a cursor to. So our verb is going to be, we're going to change. We choose one of these three, and we chose change, and we see that the terminal is going to be C. And then the cursor to, we get change to the end of the line. This was actually one of the examples that we worked through together. This is a really handy one to know. So now we have two high-level commands under our belts. We've got the cursor to command, which just moves our cursor around. And again, the emphasis here is trying to teleport to where you want to go first, and then use the smaller steps to navigate closer to where you are. And then for operations, I'm going to encourage you to try and use change whenever you want to change some text. Only if you really wanted to delete something and not change it to anything else should you use delete. And then yank, we'll see, I'll show you that in just a moment. But yank is copy. So to get a sense of how we can use a grammar and start to extend a grammar and compose concepts in many different ways, notice we're adding a third command. And that third type of command is a line operation. So this operation that we were talking about before, by default, an operation takes you from where your cursor is to some other location. But a line operation is going to apply to the entire line that your cursor is on. Right? So if you want to delete an entire line or change an entire line or yank, copy an entire line, we see that what a line operation is defined as is some repeated verb. So how is repeated verb defined? Well, notice we're going to use our verbs, which were non-terminals we defined previously, delete, delete, or change, change, or yank, yank. And each of those is the terminals D, C, and Y, respectively. So if we say DD, that's going to be a repeated verb that deletes the line. CC will change the line, and so on. So let's try this out. So I'm on line, let's say I jump to line 13. So 13 and then capital G. Boom, I'm there. And what if I wanted to delete this line? DD, and it's gone, right? On U for undo, and it's back, right? I'm going to go to line 4, so 4G, and I'm going to press DD again, and that line is gone. Now, when you delete, it's actually more like cut, as you're used to in a text editor that's a GUI-based one. So if I were to press P, you'll notice that each time I press P, I'm pasting the last thing I deleted, right? So I can undo that. And just like with the location commands, you'll notice that if I press P, I'm deleting below I'm pasting below where my cursor is. But if I press Shift P, I'm pasting above where my cursor is. So this sort of dichotomy between lowercase and uppercase tending to correspond to after or before is showing up here. So for example, if I go to line 10 capital G, press P, it's pasting below. I can undo that, and capital P is going to paste above. And notice it's pasting that whole line and shifting everything down. This winds up being pretty handy. All right. Let's talk about changing an entire line. So maybe I'll go to line, 30 and then G. Nothing on that line, so I'll go down by 1. And that's an example of like you jump somewhere, you need to get somewhere close by. The J key will move you down by 1 line. It's okay to crawl if your cursor is near where it needs to be. So let's say we wanted to change this entire line. So I might move my cursor somewhere in the middle of this line and press C twice, change, that repeated verb. And notice, boom, that entire line is gone. And not only is it gone, but I'm in insert mode, so I can start typing. So this is some text, right? Control open square bracket brings me back to normal mode. You're gonna hear me say control open square bracket a lot. That's like that 2 pinky keystroke is one to just commit to memory and feel good about, right? One of the interesting things about changing a line is you haven't lost, or changing anything, you haven't lost what you just changed. You can paste that as well. So P will paste whatever you just changed. So when you change something, that's also like cutting it. The key difference between changing and deleting text is with change, you instantly go into insert mode, and that's really, really nice, right? The last one I want to show you is yanking. So if I yank some text with YY, so YY while I'm on a line with some text, and I press P again, each time I press P, I'm pasting below, and a undo will get me back to where I was. All right, so frequently, if you want to paste something and then edit from there, YY and then P will get you a new line that looks a lot like the one that you were just on. All right. So just like before, and mostly for reference in the slide deck, we can look at how do we form a line operation that produces a repeated verb, and this would be the parse tree for something like that, right? All right. If you're trying to exit, just like Vim, exiting Vim is a meme, capital ZZ is one way to try it. And then Control C might tell you, if Control C doesn't do it, if you need to back out of your terminal and close it out the way that we looked at before, that's one way of doing it. I promise that once you get a little bit more comfortable with Vim, you won't find yourself in those scary places before. If you try typing :Q and then exclamation point, :Q exclamation point, this is that X mode. Quit is for Q, and that'll quit you out of it as well. Hopefully one of those gets you going. Otherwise, just follow along, and we're mostly just trying to look in broad strokes at what we can do. All right. So as I mentioned, these concepts compose with one another. So we've got multiple production rules now where we're making use of verbs. We've got multiple production rules now where we're making use of this idea of cursor to, and we're using them in different ways that allow us to express certain commands using a language that's more powerful than we can just with arrows and a mouse, right? But like with any language, it takes some time to learn and get comfortable with. To give you an example of the power of this, I'm going to introduce one other variation on our rule. But I want to talk about this syntax really quickly because it's new. So notice at the beginning of a command, we're saying there's a non-terminal named n repeats. We'll go look at that definition in just a second. And there's this question mark. In grammars, the question mark is going to mean optional. This is used in many programming languages as well, like TypeScript uses the question mark for an optional parameter, and it's in this sort of lineage. Regular expressions use this in their grammars. And the idea is you can have this, or you don't have to have it, but you can have at most one. So either there's not going to be an n repeats in our commands, and up until now there hasn't been, but we can have an n repeats here, and that would be followed by any one of these three things. And because they're in parentheses, we're saying n repeats will optionally be in a command, and then it will be followed by either cursor to or operation or line operation. So what is n repeats? Well, we define this as either a digit or a digit followed by more n repeats. And this is sort of a recursive definition that says we can build up numbers in this way out of digits, right? So we can have many digits in a row. And what this means, once Vim incorporated this idea, it means we can have the same command repeated as many times as we specify in some number. We can use a number of times for that same operation or command to be carried out. All right, so let's take a look at this. So let's say I'm going to move to, so /para brings me, or if you just did for capital G, that brings you to line 4 for paragraphs. And a simple one would be, let's move 3 words forward at a time. So 3W moves me 1, 2, 3 forward to or. If I wanted to delete 10 lines at a time, I could say 10, so 1, 0, and then DD for my repeated verb that deletes a line at a time. And notice I've just deleted 10 lines, right? I might undo that. Let's say we wanted to jump to the phrase this one. So I'm going to type / this space 1, and that brings me to this item. You can be on any line. But let's say I press YY to copy this entire line. So I'm yanking this entire line into my clipboard. I can now say something like 100 and then P to paste that same line 100 times over, right? And so this ability to take some command that we're expressing as a string that we type into our keyboard and now have that command automatically be repeated any number of times that we want it to be is pretty powerful. And you'll find that oftentimes this comes in handy when you're just repeating something over and over. And when we learn a really powerful concept in Vim that we're not going to get to today called macros, repeating a macro many times over is like a true superpower that allows you to do things that you just couldn't even imagine in a regular text editor. All right. So we can also generate a line operation, and the parse tree would look something like this, where let's say we wanted to delete 3 lines. Well, we form a command. We're going to repeat this 3 times. So the n repeats would have a digit 3, and then the line operation would be a repeated verb, dd. All right. So some people have asked, how do you change to insert mode? And just like everything else, there are a few different ways you can. Let me give you some of the best or the most useful ways when you're doing this with programming. So let's say we're on line 4. I go to 4G, that brings me to the beginning of line 4. And I want to start typing, like inserting new text below the line I'm currently on. In a normal text editor, you would press down and then enter your text and then press enter again. With Vim, the O key, so O is going to give you the ability to start inserting on the following line. So O inserts a new line and allows you to start typing, right? I'm going to use Control open square bracket and U to undo that. I might bring my cursor down to line 9, and notice if I press O while I'm on line 9, it's shifted everything down by 1. It's automatically inserted a new line, and now I'm in insert mode, and I could add another bullet, right? So O inserts on the line below you, and just like we've been learning, if you're in normal mode and you want to insert on the line above you, you would use capital O, and that would give you a new line and put you into insert mode right above you. All right. Getting in the habit of just pressing Control open square bracket as soon as you're done with something is something that will become second nature soon. Right? The difference between insert mode and append mode is if you press I and you start typing, you're in insert mode and your text will go before where your cursor was when you pressed I. Right? If you press A, it will start right after. So you're appending right after where your cursor currently was. With insert and append, you commonly want to insert at the beginning of a line or append at the end of a line. And just like with some of the other keys we've pressed, so here you're seeing me, I pressed something I didn't mean to, I press Control, open square bracket, I'm back to where I need to be. Just like with other keys, the shift variant winds up being a commonly useful variation. So if I press Shift I, capital I is inserting me at the beginning of a line, and I just typed some text, backed out and undid it. And capital A is appending at the end of a line, right? And so those variations of insert and append relative to your cursor, or the capitalized version is relative to the entire line, are quite nice. All right. There are a few others, like if you want to change from where your cursor currently is to the end of the line, the capital C will do that. Capital D would do the same with delete. All right. So this will be a table on the last cheat sheet as well. I'm going to skip over text objects for just a second, come back to them, and talk a little bit about replaying the last operation. So since we're building up these operations using text, it should be pretty easy to repeat the last one that we just did. So if I'm in my text editor and let's say I wanted to delete this line, DD does it. Well, if I wanted to keep deleting lines at a time, I can the dot is going to repeat whatever the last thing I did was. So each time you press the period, it's repeating what you did. If I wanted to, if I press YY on a line and then paste that line, so YY and then P, and then I press the dot, now it's repeating that I pasted something, right? If I wanted to delete a word at a time, so if I press DW, now when I press the dot, it's repeating that exact same last command, it's deleting a word at a time. So the dot gives you the ability to say something that you can't say in most text editors. Hey, whatever I just did before, repeat that. Let me give you one other example of that. So I'm going to go back to line 4. You can be on any line. Let's change this word to foobar. Right? So we want to change a word. So CW, change word, and that puts me into insert mode. And let's foobar. Right? So I enter the text, Control, open square bracket. I'm back to normal mode. And now I'm going to advance my cursor to the next word with, say, W. If I press the dot again, notice it's carrying out that last operation again. So it's not going to repeat a location to. We're not jumping to the same location. We're not repeating jumping around in our documents. It's one of our actions that we took, like changing some text, deleting some text, or pasting some text. And so now, each time you press the dot on a given word, it's repeating the operation of changing some text to foobar and continuing on. All right. And we're getting close to being able to think about what a macro is, but we'll save that for a future time. Right? But this is pretty cool. What this is saying is the last string operation that you entered into Vim is being stored, and then each time you press the dot, that operation is being replayed. And it doesn't matter what the last operation was, as long as it fits this language, it gets repeated. But that last operation, notice, is not a command, it's an operation, and that was something that's either moving the verb to a specific cursor or a line operation would work with this as well. So the cheat sheet that you'll see on resources that I'll update in a minute after the lecture, I'll make sure that this text is legible, it's not white on pink. We'll have all of the things that we talked about, and I'll put it on a background that's a little bit more conducive to printing so that you can print it off. Having this printed off or just keeping it open while you're getting used to this is important. It looks like we do have time for me to show you one other valuable thing that you can do in Vim, and then I'll look at the questions list and get through the remaining questions. So let me jump back to this idea of text objects. And before we try and figure out what exactly this grammar is doing, let's imagine a common piece of programming code like foo, and then in parentheses, so your argument might be 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And let's imagine our cursor is right here. Commonly, you'll want to change everything that's inside of those parentheses. or change everything that's including the parentheses and get rid of the parentheses and everything inside of it. Or you might want to do this with an entire set of statements in curly braces, right? There might be multiple lines inside of curly braces that you want to get rid of. Vim considers like the text inside of a pair of parentheses what we call a text object, or the lines inside of curly braces, a text object. And we can apply operations to text objects with a minor variation. And that variation is whether we want to apply the verb inside of this object, so that would mean inside of the parentheses, or around the object, which would mean including the parentheses, right? So we're going to say a terminal. So typically inside is the one that I would encourage you to get comfortable with. That's the more valuable one, I think. And that's just I. So if we're trying to change inside the parentheses, it would be CI. And then the question is, what text object are we targeting? And the text object will be something like, say, the surrounding set of curly braces, or in this case, the surrounding parentheses. So closing square or closing parenthesis. So CI parenthesis, right? Let's try this out real quick. Oops. So I'm going to clear this, and I'm going to enter a line of code that looks something like, let's see, int foo, int x, and it's going to return to x, right? So I'm making up some code here that I've inserted, and now what we're going to try and do is use a text object to target this parameter list. So maybe I'll use my search backwards, right? I want to get to that x. So I use question mark for search backwards, and then x, press enter, and boom. Like question mark, search for something if you're moving backwards in your text, and now my cursor is on this x, right? So if I wanted to change inside of these parentheses, or change inside of this word object, the C is going to be for change. The I is going to be for inside. And then the parenthesis, and I'm going to encourage you to use a closing parenthesis for something that we might talk about a little bit more later. Both will work, but this will be a parenthesis. So change inside paren. And what that will do is, so CI and then paren, it deleted everything that was inside of the parentheses, no matter where my cursor was inside of those parentheses, and now I can type again. So maybe I wanted to make this a double X or something, right? And then I'm back to normal mode with control open square bracket. We could imagine, so here's an example. I'm on this line and I want to insert some new lines of code below this, but above the return. In a normal text editor, you would need to either go to the end of this line or the start of the next line, press enter, and then move your cursor again. In Vim, I press O, that gives me a new line. Normally, if this were a C file or a Java file, this would have put my cursor at the correct place. It would have already indented it for me. But because this is a markdown file, it's not doing anything smart here. So let's add another line, like this is a comment, right? And so O inserted a new line, moved my text down, and now I can start typing here. And now, rather than changing inside of the parenthesis, I'll show you another word object, which is our text object, which is the curly braces. So let's say, okay, I want to get rid of, let's just say I wanted to delete all of the text inside of these. Rather than the C, we could use the D verb. So let me just change this text so that it makes a little bit more sense with the video. We could say delete inside of these, and then these aren't parentheses, these are curlies, right? And now what I can do, oops, is I've got my cursor here, I'm in normal mode, DI, and then curly brace, and notice I've deleted all of that text, right? But I'm back in normal mode, unlike with change where I would be able to type now. I'll press U for undo. Again, we could also do C for change inside curly brace, and now I'm typing again inside of my curlies, right? I'm undoing back to this point, and I mentioned inside versus around. Let me just give a quick demo of that. So now what we're going to do is change around the curly braces. So change will be C, and A is going to be the modifier we use for what we're targeting. So A is around curly braces, all right? And so I'm here and see a curly brace, and so notice around means including the word object's delimiter. In this case, the word objects, both of the curly braces. So now I have no curly braces, but I'm in insert mode because I did change, all right? So I'm gonna go back to normal mode, control, open square bracket, U for undo. Similarly with these parentheses, if I said delete around A, so DA and then parenthesis, oops, I didn't press the parenthesis, I pressed the plus button. So delete around, so DA parenthesis, and I'm deleting around those parentheses inclusive of them, all right? This also works with words. So previously, I'm back in caps lock mode. And I'm finding myself now in a mode where my terminal is unresponsive because I am trying to type and talk at the same time. So I'm going to give you a demo, as many of you were looking for before, of if you find yourself, oh, there we go, we're back in business. I'm going to just give it a second. I'm not sure what my container is doing in this live demo. I just tried the exit command, and if that doesn't take, I'm just going to restart this thing and show you that as a refresher of how that works. So I'm just going to do it. So I'm going to go back to my terminal. There's no downside in doing this. If you find yourself in an unresponsive place, I pressed some keys accidentally, and now what we're going to see, the way that you can stop your container is Docker PS, right? And so notice, I'm gonna have to make this a little bit smaller, and I'll go to screen only for a second so that it is a little bit bigger for you all. If you need to stop a container, remember you do Docker PS, and that shows you the ID of a container. So I can do Docker stop 9 AC61, which was my container's unique ID. That'll take a second. Taking a little bit longer than a second. There we go. And now if I were to do Docker PS again, we see that nothing's running. So I go back into my Learn CLI directory and I start back up. All right, and we're back to square one, whatever I last saved in my file. So this will actually be an interesting way to show you, when I open example.md, I'm going to expect to see something that says, hey, it looks like there are some unsaved changes. And in fact, here it is. It says, we found something called a swap file. And what this is a swap file are some changes that weren't saved while you're working and Vim crashed or you restarted your container or something like that. So I'm going to just try capital R with recover and press enter, and I should be back to my last state. And sure enough, this is where we were before. Right, so if you find yourself in a bad position, closing your container window, stopping that container and starting it back up should be fine. It's unexpected. I wouldn't have expected that to happen. I don't know what I pressed to get into that state. All right. So let's jump. So the examples to close out this text object, and then I'll take the last questions, are some examples were here. If you wanted to change inside parentheses, CI closing parenthesis, or CA parenthesis will change around it, right? And this is a little bit more advanced. I wouldn't encourage getting hung up on these text objects yet. I think the bread and butter of what you want to do are teleportation, jumping, using searching, or two specific line numbers. That's your key way of getting around. And then from there, how to move quickly on a given line to some other place on the line. And then getting used to using the change operation. And that change operation is what's going to allow you to change some text very quickly, and then you get back out into normal mode. And in doing this, what you'll find is you can actually very quickly jump to the text that you want, move around, and we'll see some other operations that allow us to work with blocks of text at a time. All right. Can you move your cursor while in insert mode is a question that comes up. There is a way. I'm going to encourage you not to explore it. I actually don't remember. There's like a certain escape. There's like a temporary escape mode that you can be in while you're in insert mode to jump somewhere else and then be back in insert mode. I would just encourage Control open square bracket, go back to normal mode, and then and go back and forth. I think the arrow keys work while you're in insert mode, but that's like the crawl stage of our diagram, right? You really don't want to be crawling around character by character in insert mode. So the blinking cursor is probably going to be system to system. That's actually a property of your terminal. So if you look at your terminal's properties, there's probably a property of whether or not your cursor is blinking, or what color it is, or whether it's a block or a line. And so if you look at your terminal, whether you're using Windows Terminal or the terminal program on Mac, and you look in your settings, you can configure the color of it and the properties of how it displays there. If you hit undo, how will you know how much text has been undone? Great question. Let me try and answer that with a slightly different question, which is, what if you undo something you really wanted? I should talk about redo, right? So let's say I press DD and I just deleted a lot of things. So I'm pressing my dot button. I'm deleting a lot of lines. Okay, we want to undo that. So I start pressing undo, and then, oh no, I realized I actually did want some of those actions to be have taken place. Control R, and I'll add this to the cheat sheet. Control R is redo. Right? So if undo is U, Control R is redo, and that causes the last thing that happened that was undone to be redone. All right. Why do I prefer Control open square bracket over escape? This is a great question. So one, for me, even on a good keyboard, escape is a hard button for me to reach. That's much more uncomfortable than something that's very close to both of my pinkies. Two, the location of the escape key varies quite differently between two different keyboards. On some keyboards, there's a number of years where Macs didn't even have an escape key. It was like a soft key that was part of that touch bar, so the escape key was gone. It's a little bit of a personal preference, but what I find is once you get comfortable with that Control open square bracket, it's much more preferable than like having to reach and go a big distance for the actual escape key. They're both the same for all intents and purposes. You can, and some people do, remap like the caps lock button to be escape, and they'll use caps lock as escape. And you're free to modify your Vim settings if you want to start messing with that. I did that at one point earlier in my career, and I found that was nice until you log into another machine and your key bindings aren't there, and oh, you're back in square zero. Control open square bracket is almost always going to evaluate to escape. And so sometimes people even rebind escape, and that's kind of a frustrating thing to see. But that's sort of the story there. I think it's the safest bet. It's the easiest once you get your pinkies used to it versus trying to reach, and it's the most consistent. Like between keyboards, you can usually find that combination much more easily than you can find the escape if you're on somebody else's computer. All right, that is all the questions that I've seen. So I'm gonna close the stream here and say, I know there's a lot going on at UNC right now. We're going to keep moving forward as best we can and rolling with the news as it comes in. I recognize that the next week is probably going to be, because I just saw the news before class about going to remote only, which we are already remote only. So for this class's purposes, it doesn't really impact a lot, but I recognize that if it's going to create new burdens on getting to somewhere else to complete the semester or things like that, there's probably going to be some things that we need to navigate, and we'll get through it and have some flexibility there. On Wednesday, we'll have the quiz on chapter 2, and then we'll keep going with GCC from there. For office hours, if you open up Course Care and go to the Comp 211 site, I'll show you what that looks like here. So we've got hours tomorrow from 12 to 4, Wednesday from 11 to 5, Thursday from 12 to 4 as well, and then on Friday too. The instructions for getting into CourseCare were in the first slide deck, and I'll add a resources page on this as well if I haven't already. But this is the preferred way of coming in and getting help on office hours. All right. That's it. Looks like that's all the questions. Great work today. This is a lot of information, but focusing on teleportation, changing text, and getting back to normal mode, if you can get those 3 things down, you'll feel much more productive very quickly in Vim. And once again, to get out of a file and save it, capital ZZ, and you're back to your terminal. All right. Have a good rest of your evening, and I will see you all on Wednesday.